So lately I've been getting into trying to like sample guitar riffs and stuff like that off of TikTok and turning them into hyperpop beats. So today I have one that's kind of like a slow silver 03 type beat, and I'm just going to break down all the production that I've done on it so far, and we'll start by just playing the whole thing so you kind of know what you're getting into. So I started producing on the EDM and dubstep side of things, so I feel like I've gotten pretty good at making sounds, but I've never gotten that good at like using sounds cohesively, or like melodic samples or whatever cohesively to make a full song. So this tutorial is more about like how to do sample usage and like different tricks that you can use to get a cohesive and like interesting sound while using mostly things that you don't have to make yourself. And then also, I just put a sample pack out, Glitchy Bullshit Super Duper. It kind of leans more hyperpop and like bedroom poppy than Glitchy Bullshit Super did, but that's kind of just been what I've been more into making lately. It's also not completely finished, so I'm going to add more samples to it, but you can get it for 25 bucks now. It's going to go up to 30 later. And if you buy it for 25, you'll still get the full pack. Just come back and re-download it later. So the first piece that I started with on this one is this Seth Morrison 9476 sample that I found on YouTube Shorts that I took and kind of just synced to the tempo of my track. Then I took a Contact guitar sampler, which I really haven't ever found a use for up until this point in producing, and just made something that kind of I felt like fit with it, using the little key switches and stuff, which I'm not going to explain, but just a couple chords and some key switches here to kind of get like something that fit well with it. Then took the Seth Morrison sample and pitched it up an octave and made it twice as fast using resampling. And took the sampled guitar, which I rendered to audio, and just made it go twice as fast without pitching it up an octave. Then for the first 16 bars, I just have those both playing at the same time, with the purple one being sent through some really light like distortion and some EQing and some heavy compression, which is really just to make it where these really big peaks that I have, like right here and here, are not quite as pronounced, right? I just want them to be a little smaller. You hear how it's kind of like snatchy? So I just kind of fixed those using compression. Added light distortion and an EQ to take some of the highs off, which will just make more space for the orange guitar. Then I just let that Contact sample repeat 4 times while I slowly fade in the volume and a low pass filter on the Seth Morrison YouTube sample. So I'll kind of play that real quick. And so the reason that I'm using a low pass along with this fruity send that I'm automating the dry up on is because if you just use a low pass filter, you kind of have like the low mids being so full through the whole thing that you don't get that nice like slow rise into it. So basically what I did here is I just went in and got my low pass where like I feel like I can start kind of hearing what I want to hear right here basically, and then like started a volume automation. See, you feel how that's just way better than just doing the low pass? Because it's so strong in the low mids that it kind of overtakes the other sample there. So that's just, you know, one piece that I found worked a lot better than what I usually would do, which is just a low pass filter. So let's get into the next part that I have that I kind of sound designed, which is if you listen really close to this sample, there's like almost like a harmonic weird thing happening in the background. And I was hearing that while I was producing. So I just kind of took that and it kind of goes like, wee, wee. That's what it sounds like to me at least. And made a sound design thing that just does that exactly. So all I have here so the layering on this one is just a little melodic lead that's actually from Glitchy Bullshit Super Duper. I know that's a mouthful, so I'll probably just say Glitchy Bullshit Super for this, but basically. So I'm just playing those two notes there. Then I have another layer that's just some noise. Then I have another layer that's even more noise, except for this one's with the massive X, which just has nice noise in it, in my opinion. I don't use this for much other than noise. So kind of like atonally even, almost like out of, you know, I don't want it to be exactly a bunch of like synced to the correct, you know, pitch. I want there to be a little bit of weirdness in there so it sounds old and dusty. Then I have this ambient sync drip sample, and I just kind of layer that over the background of this as it repeats, so. Then I've sent all those different layers that I've like added a little frequency shifting and some heavy EQing to kind of just get it to go into this snap heap, which just basically has an LFO that bends a frequency shifter on the beginning of the first part, and then the you know, the beginnings of the notes, basically it's getting pitched up using frequency shifting and then back down. And I just kind of have that layer sit in the background, even though it will change over the course of the track. And I'll go ahead and show this now just so I don't have to come back to it later. Basically what I do is I always keep these couple like noise layers playing the same notes. But I do have some changes that come into the main. You know, so the main synth changes on this, but the, you know, up and down layers like this, they don't really change at all. So they just kind of keep doing what they're doing. Which just adds some like kind of interesting, almost like chordal stuff to it. And then at the end, this one just goes to where it goes up an octave. Instead of going down, it goes up instead. And those changes happen at certain parts, but now that you know how it's made, I can kind of just say that it changes instead of having to show all the parts of it changing. So I just keep this layer kind of bending back and forth for the beginning part. And then the last thing that I have here is just, I'll mute out my melodic parts and just have this, you know, effects send going. And it is just the retro bend, which is the bendy little synth that I just showed, and the purple guitar contact layer being sent into a reverb followed by a MAME, which is like a spectral thing. And I'll just kind of leave this open and let it play along with a fruity send and just a little EQing off the highs. So I'll leave the MAME open and the fruity send so you can kind of see what happens as we go along here. I'll kind of scroll down so you can see these are my automations for that, and I'll just move this here, move this here. And so I'm automating this parameter, which is the amplitude shift, which just brings in a weird crustiness once you get to past the 50% point. So that's a nice way to get like some weird digital stuff into your mix or whatever. And so that piece just gives a nice ambience that I can kind of sweep in and out of my different sections to give, first of all, like a pad texture underneath it, and second of all, like something that can kind of increase energy while I don't have much other stuff going on right here. So songwriting wise, you can see that I basically, I've swept that swell into the chord coming in, and then I've switched to that second version. I have to probably turn that off so it doesn't keep playing. My little retro bend is the second version that I had here with a little more like harmonizing or whatever going on. And then let's get into what this chord is. So this chord is a mini version of the main chord. So I'll start with saying, all I did here was just write a basic chord melody, and I'm going to turn off one of my effects here, which is the destructor. And so basically I wrote a very basic bass pattern to go along with this, and I'm using a fruity layer, which lets you play multiple samples at the same time. The first sample is a glitchy bullshit super duper sample, which is that really shitty, almost unusably shitty sounding chord sample, but for some reason it works for this. So I'm just kind of playing a couple notes here. I've made a volume envelope to give it a little bit more boppiness instead of just playing the sample. That's really static with the volume envelope. And I've also turned on mono and made the slide a little longer so it's a little more slidey. And then just sent that into some chorus and an EQ bumping the mids up a good bit. So I'll kind of just turn all these on. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And then a compressor. So taking that almost unusably, you know, weird, melancholic kind of chord, and then making something useful out of it, which is like, you know, one of the big lessons from trying to do more sample work, which is like, oh shit, a lot of stuff works for everything. I don't need to be so picky and be like, oh, I just need a good enough sample. It's like, no, you just need to use the sample that you have. You'll find a way to make it more useful than it is. So then the next piece is one of the bass samples from Glitchy Bullshit. That kind of like wide, almost like a wide little 808 or thunk bass sound that you can hear there. And I've just taken that, added a volume envelope and a little pitch drop to it. And done a couple things to just kind of make it fit with what I have. So the first thing, I'll turn all these effects on one at a time, is an EQ. Compressor. Distortion. And then this frequency shifter, which is just doing like weird little ring modi type distortion. Then I can mix those layers together. And you may be saying, what is this automation here? This automation just takes this destructor, which makes the bass layer only a little quieter and also in a weird space. It just shrinks the bottom layer of this, the bass layer of this sound down. So it's almost just like a little chord hit. And so that's, you know, the way that I can have this as like a not as impactful version as I have at the drop right here. So, right, that versus this. And if I was going to, and I will finish this song because I think this one turned out well, but I basically would probably add something else to like kind of let you know the drop is coming right here. So some kind of swell, or I'd do something else with the transition right here, but might even be a little glitch piece or some kind of tomfoolery to make this a little more impactful on the drop. And as you can tell here, I might not have mentioned this, I cut the Seth Morrison like strummy high guitar out. And I forgot to mention this part, but I cut the Seth Morrison sample out right here, and then I don't bring it back right here. It looks like it comes back, but it actually comes back, you know, right here in the second half of the drop. So I'll just kind of play it through from right here. And I'm going to talk about a couple pieces of this, basically the drums, but I want to start by saying I have chord basic right here, and I have another pattern in this one called hat basic. And the reason that I have these two is because this is the most simple form of what I do with my bass chord thing, and this is the most simple flow that I use for my almost all the drums, basically. It is a dotted second flow where I've taken these two hits right here and just swung them back a little bit without the grid being on. So just move those back to like there. So that instead of the other version, which both work, but I just kind of prefer it with a little bit of swing on this one. So let me move those to where they started at, so I have my basic flow. And so I kind of save these versions even though I'm not using the hat basic anywhere in the track. And so what that gives you is basically like the simplest form of your idea that you can kind of then like make adjustments to and have variations of at different points of your track, to kind of keep things interesting but not lose like the central idea, like the most basic form of the idea that you have. It just lets you build on it without and like adjust it without saying, oh well, now I have this really convoluted bass pattern or whatever, or drum pattern that doesn't really work. And then you can do like stutters. You know, you can add bends in like I have right here, these different little bendy pieces. Little mute out sections like this. So, you know, I've made adjustments with my bass there, and that all that comes in when I'm like sweeping the main guitar back in. So let's talk drums for just a little minute. And I've kind of done the same idea that I had with my very basic hat principle, where I started out with just my drum pattern being those hats, which is, you know, just the super basic hat pattern, going along with a snare. And with the classic like hip hop kick on the 1 and then kick on the 2 of the second bar. That's all you really need. And to be honest, like if you don't have a vocalist on your track yet or whatever, I would probably not even write crazier stuff than that to start out. My way that I do this is usually make it way more complicated than it needs to be, which you don't have to do. And then like refine it down to the best parts of the ideas that you've come up with, right? So just repeating this little 2-bar pattern over and over again, and then adding stuff as need be. So for this one, you know, the first thing I probably added was a couple little rolls on the hats. Right, and then I went in here and I said, you know, it would be nice, a little stutter kick at the end to kind of like loop it back into the first part, but only, you know, on this second part. I don't do it again right here. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, I need to add something that gives a little percussiveness. Let me put these, what are they called? Clavs on top of it. And then, you know, so adding the clavs on top of that, and then saying, well, let me get some little like percussion stuff going in here in the other part of this. And usually when I'm writing drums, especially adding the like rhythmic parts of it, these pieces right here, I'll do this to the bass of my track, like the, you know, bass or just the rhythmic element that I have going, not really the leads and stuff typically. And then, you know, just kind of repeat that and don't get overly complex. Maybe add some stuff in the second half that'll like kind of give it some variation. And one of the things that I've done to glue all these drums together really well is when I made this clap, which is just a bunch of glitchy bullshit super, these are all glitchy bullshit super duper samples, but the way that I made it is I had all these claps that I was kind of stacking on top. You know, I started with the couple of samples, a little bit of chorus, some heavy compression, just kind of makes it a little snappier, some distortion, a little bit of weight, but a lot of volume, so then I compress it down again. Then for this last piece here, I'll kind of play it in the mix before I add this, but I added an EQ. And no matter how I like adjusted the volume or whatever on this, I couldn't really get it to fit in the mix until I added this low pass that cuts a lot of the highs out, which I never do with snares, but it just makes it feel to me like it just works better. As far as like not being overly bright and trappy. Like it's almost like a trap snare on a really relaxed beat. Like I don't feel like it needs all that. Right, feel how bright all those drums are. And then the other thing that I did too is like for these little in-between snares, the like accent snares, I'm just using different layers of the clap that are also getting routed into all this mixing, you know, compression and distortion. And by sending all those different drums into the same effects chain that's pretty heavy, it just kind of glues it all together. Except for some of the drums, I'll kind of leave out of the compression if they get a little wonky, like this one. Just doesn't quite sound as good. The original tone of the drum is like a little roomy hit. I like that better than that like squashed version that the clap processing does to it. So some of them I just bypass it, but then other ones like this one sound better, in my opinion. Like that is just a little nicer. So to finish this one out, I'll just kind of play the drop/chorus through on this one. So if you want to support this channel, you can do that by going to Patreon, getting on the Patreon. I have a new tier where you can rent my time, so I'll make whatever sample or whatever sound or whatever thing you need broken down. I'll do at least a 15-minute video, or make samples for you, or work on your own song. I can ghost produce for your shit. Whatever you need from me, $40 tier. Thank you for watching. Go buy the sample pack, and I will see y'all next week in the video where I break down how you can fix a guitar timing sample that you've gotten off of TikTok or whatever to make it fit to the tempo of the DAW. So thank you for watching. See you in the next one.